I'm Jimmy Ibbotson.
And I'm Lynn Isagear. Welcome to the premiere issue of Sea-Fan's Video Magazine.
We're thrilled to have you along with us to share some of the world's greatest diving. We'll be starting right here in the thriving waters of the Sea of Cortez. Our journey into this, the youngest of all seas, begins in the moonlight with a middle-of-the-night departure from La Paz, Mexico, aboard the Santa Barbara, a 65-foot live-aboard dive vessel.
We're headed for Los Isoltes, a rocky outcropping in the Sea of Cortez some 30 miles north of La Paz. Sunrise finds the boat approaching the cathedral spires of this guano-draped island. A large colony of sea lions serenades us with wake-up calls. Frigate birds are circling the pinnacles, but the noisemakers cluster on a low saddle of rocks.
While the rest of our early rising crew is at first content to observe and wake up, I'm anxious to get into my snorkel gear and answer the siren call from the rocks. My approach doesn't bother the lions, and they seem ready to greet me at the surface. When I dive below, I see these graceful creatures in their true element. They examine me, a stranger in their world, with some curiosity, some barks, and a mildly threatening pose from one of the bulls.
Is that as great as it looks from here?
Maybe better. Could you see, they'd come down and they'd dance with me. Underwater, they'd spin and twirl and swirl. And then I got a little weird because this real big bull, must have weighed 600 pounds, kept coming around and kind of asking where my invitation to the dance was. You got to come in and join me.
Jimmy's excitement is infectious, so I'm quickly ready to join him on scuba to be part of this dance myself. Before we reach the sea lions, the water flashes before us as we pass through a school of thousands of baitfish.
A bright cloud, part of the pulsating life that fills this fertile sea, envelops us. The fish sweep across the underwater landscape and lead us to the sea lions that share these waters with them. The lions act like they've been expecting us, and eager to impress us with their grace, they launch into their dance.
It's a dance I'll never forget. The canine expressions and the acrobatic antics of my fellow dancers delight me.
The cows are the most playful of the lions, making a game of racing up and down a small canyon in the rocks. They spin and swirl and dash past us fearlessly.
Now the pups are somewhat more cautious, stopping now and then to peer at us curiously with their wide eyes. It's hard to believe that when these guys are grown, they'll be able to stay down for 30 minutes and descend up to 500 feet. But it's pretty dark at 500 feet, so they'll use a kind of biological sonar called echolocation. The speed of the echoes from their barks tells them how far off things are.
And then there are the bulls. They approach us, questioning our presence in their realm. They pursue what becomes sort of a ritual, circling in front, then rushing at us with teeth bared, only to veer off at the last moment and resume their patrol. They don't make contact with us, but they certainly do make their territorial claims quite clear.
We get much the same reaction from them on the surface. The bulls are gruff, the cows are playful and relaxed, but they bark a lot to try to locate their pups. And the pups are curious but somewhat timid. Los Azotes hosts the second largest sea lion rookery in the Sea of Cortez.
The lions have it pretty easy here, spending most of their time resting and sunning on the rocks or playing in the water. They feed in the evening or at night on the abundant fish population that surrounds them. They seem accustomed to visitors here, but the bulls don't let us forget whose island it really is. It's an idyllic and unspoiled place here, but eventually it's time to leave and continue our expedition.
The Sea of Cortez was formed 25 million years ago, when what is now Baja California separated from the mainland of Mexico. It's a deep rift between the two land masses. Cold, nutrient-rich water from the Pacific is channeled into it. When that water meets the walls of the islands and the pinnacles throughout the Sea of Cortez, it upwells. The nutrients brought to the surface support the profusion of life in the shallow zones. Our trip here will take us from La Paz in southern Baja California to several islands in the Central Gulf and end in San Carlos, further north on the mainland.
Lane Larson, the organizer and guide for our trip here, is from Tucson, Arizona. He operates a dive store there and a dive operation called Cortez Sea Sports in San Carlos, Mexico. He uses the Santa Barbara for extended trips to the best diving spots in the Sea of Cortez. But this boat is far from luxurious. The best accommodations are a sleeping bag rolled out on the upper covered deck. And although Lane plans extensive renovation, there are only 2 heads now for 5 crew members and up to 12 passengers that the boat can carry. The crew is friendly and helpful, though. There's fresh fish and other great food prepared every day. And Lane is well qualified to introduce us to these waters. He's been coming here since he was 8 years old.
I've been just kind of exposed to it when I was younger through my parents, who are biologists, and kind of growing from there. Fall in love with it, I'm sure, as you're falling in love with it too. It's a very beautiful place. You know, when people think of diving, they automatically think of the Caribbean many times. If you look at the Caribbean, it has crystal waters and exotic corals, but it doesn't have the magnitude of life that the Sea of Cortez does. Here, life is measured more in tons rather than individuals, whereas in other places it's more of smaller individuals. But I think that we as divers need to start being very boisterous about protecting this body of water if our children are ever going to see it.
Do you feel that your impact as a guide to the Sea of Cortez is adding to the problem?
Adding to the problem? Well, I kind of look at it in the opposite. I try and bring about an awareness of an ocean that, and an angle of information and hopefully a total experience of this body of water to them that they might not get any other way. And I think that the people that spend time with us on our expeditions and diving trips here go away with a much better understanding of the delicate ecosystems that they've been diving in.
I asked him about El Bajo, the open ocean seamount that we're heading to for our next dive.
Because of its nature, it tends to form or create direct, cold, deep water upwellings, which bring up plankton-rich waters. And because of this, you get oftentimes large concentrations of manta rays, whales, and an unusual schooling behavior with the scalloped hammerhead has been recorded there on a number of occasions.
Cinematographers Howard Hall and Hardy Jones captured on film these manta rays and schooling hammerhead sharks during an extended trip to El Bajo several years ago. Now, the unusual schooling behavior of the sharks is apparently part of their courtship, mating, and reproductive cycle. But the exact reason they sometimes congregate here in such vast numbers isn't really known.
The gentle manta rays, which feed on plankton swept into their mouths and through gill strainers, are drawn here by the nutrient-rich upwelling water. The prospect of diving with these sharks and rays has got me really pumped. So I'm right in the water to help locate the tops of the pinnacles, which peak at about 50 to 100 feet below the surface. When we have found El Bajo and dropped anchor, we start down to the rocks and run into powerful currents.
As I pull myself along over the rocks, I'm impressed by the dramatic landscape and by the fish that somehow maintain their position against the current. We drop down into one of the canyons among the rocks for some protection from the rushing water. Howard Hall and Hardy Jones warned us that we couldn't expect to see rays and sharks on every dive here. They spent 2 weeks filming on the seamount, and the sharks only showed up 3 of those days. Alas, all we find after fighting the currents is a lonely starfish. Finally, low on air and disappointed at not meeting any of El Bajo's more celebrated residents, we surrender to the current to skim over the rocks and off the mount.
The El Bajo currents show no sign of improving, and we've got a lot more to see. So we head further north into the central Sea of Cortez. There's plenty of excitement on the surface here. We come upon acres of feeding dolphins and race with them for a while. We anchor for the night in a protected cove on the west side of Las Animas Island. You know, Las Animas means the spirits, and the spirit here is serene as I relax to a sea lion chorus and enjoy the feeling of closeness to the water I get on a live-aboard boat, and of closeness to life I have here in the Sea of Cortez. The next day, we're in the water early to explore. It's like climbing mountains in the jungle, except it's easier. The rocks and canyon walls are covered with a lush growth of soft corals and algae. The best diving here is between 40 and 60 feet. and the visibility today seems to be in that same range, which is about average. It's a good spot for multiple dives, and late in the day we dive into a large school of open water jacks. After an all-night crossing of the Sea of Cortez, we're at San Pedro Nolasco, an island offshore from San Carlos. Here, too, is a rich growth on the canyon walls and lots of fish. On the southern tip of the island, we find a long, narrow underwater cavern.
The cavern winds back into the rocks about 100 feet. Not much seems to live here in the perpetual darkness, but its mystery is a fitting end to our Sea of Cortez experience.
I really love the Sea of Cortez. It's just a hop, skip, and a jump from the western U.S., and so I guess I'll get to come back here often. Every dive is colored with the excitement of encounter, both real and potential. The rugged terrain, dry air, and refreshing water pique my senses. Diving here is an adventure in planet ocean at its liveliest and best, and renews my sense of citizenship on Earth.
Now we're moving from the panorama of the walls and canyons of the Sea of Cortez to the magical underwater world as revealed through a photographer's macro lens.
We hope in each issue to bring you a small clinic, some of the how-tos and why-tos of underwater photography. And who could better explain some of the ins and outs of the macro lens than Chris Newbert, author and photographer of the marvelous book Within a Rainbowed Sea.
There's no magic to the technique of photography. It's a matter of utilizing the equipment, the present-day camera lenses and film, to their highest potential. Beyond that, it's nature that provides the spectacular subject matter that produces those kind of pictures.
We're here on the shores of Hanalei Bay on the beautiful garden island of Kauai in the Hawaiian Islands. Today we're with Chris Newbert, author and photographer. Welcome to Kauai and to Sea Fans magazine.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here, Jimmy. It really is.
I first learned about Chris and his work through a beautiful book called Within a Rainbowed Sea, a collection of photography and prose about our underwater planet. There's a marvelous sense of intimacy that I get reading the book and looking at the pictures. It really recreates that joyful peace that you only get under the water, Chris. You must love to dive.
Well, I do. I've been diving for 22 years. It's just as thrilling to me now as it was when I started, when I was 15. You know, it's a world of fantasy. It's a dreamlike place. It's maybe the ultimate escapism.
You seem to, your powers of concentration are intense. As I've watched you work under the water, you set up over your subject and stay for such a very long time. Your sense of the moment is intense. How do you think an amateur photographer could develop that skill more?
Well, the first skills that have to be honed are diving skills. If you're overly concerned about air consumption or bottom time and you're looking at your gauge 1 minute and doing one thing the next and you can't stabilize your buoyancy correctly, you're never going to be able to concentrate entirely on your photographs. So you have to be at complete ease with your diving. Once you've achieved that, then a diver has to become completely aware of his camera equipment such that he's not fumbling around for controls. He knows where everything is instinctively. He can reach blindly up and switch this switch and turn that knob without a lot of disturbance, because all of these disturbances are going to ultimately frighten away the subject matter. When I'm on a dive and I've decided to shoot macro, and I have made my decision on which lens I want to take, either my 50mm macro or my 100mm macro, I don't have an advance idea what I wish to photograph. It's a very opportunistic type of situation. I simply comb the reef looking for appropriate subject matter for that lens that I have selected. I look at the subject matter at that point and I make an estimate of its size. And with using that estimate, I then make an adjustment on the focusing of my camera. I then have to make a decision on the proper exposure for the subject. This is done by controlling the aperture of the camera. I have to adjust the strobe at that point on its strobe arm, and then I frame up the subject and look over the camera and visually, mentally, follow that light path from the strobe to the subject. The focusing light is an important element in my system. It will help me to see through the lens and make a more accurate precision focus. And I move the camera itself in and out towards the subject to fine-tune the focus. Bracketing is always important, and I'm reminded how important it is when I look at this photograph. I took nearly an entire roll of film of this sea anemone mouth. Out of that entire roll, I found one that had no interference, had the right exposure, and was framed exactly as I wished. Okay. Bracketing is not simply a matter of adjusting apertures one way or the other. One also would want to bracket with their focus. Some animals may not allow you to approach very closely, so you begin shooting at a slightly greater working distance. But having done so and made several shots at a greater distance, now you have a few pictures in the bank. It would now be an appropriate time to move in closely and try and get a tighter portrait. When I looked at the siphon of the sea squirt through my camera, I determined that this is a case where I wanted to maximize the depth of field using the smallest aperture possible, f/22. Using as small as possible of an aperture and more direct lighting adds some color, some mottled color to the background, and maximizes the depth of field in this particular case. I personally believe that it's a mistake to always try and achieve maximum depth of field. In many cases, I try and minimize depth of field by opening my lens up. This will render the foreground and the background out of focus, causing the chosen focal point of the picture to pop out of the background. I've found it important to look over, under, and around even the most mundane objects. In this case, I found a sea cucumber on the bottom and turned the sea cucumber over and discovered a little imperial shrimp. Involvement with photography has made me more conscious of the underwater environment. Some of the work I did, and certainly some of the most meaningful and exciting, was done in the open ocean at night, whereby I would go out 8 or 10 miles offshore at, say, 2 o'clock in the morning. The water out there is 10,000 feet deep, and I would dive down as deep as 200 feet and drift alone like a piece of plankton. And the boat, of course, you can't anchor it when it's 2 miles deep of water, so that's just drifting alone somewhere on the surface. And I would photograph the animals that during the day would live perhaps a couple thousand feet deep, but at night they would migrate vertically towards the surface for feeding. Thus, many of the pictures I took were the first time these things had ever been photographed in their natural environment. but I get just as much satisfaction out of photographing something very common in a way that's so unique that it makes people look at it and say, I've never seen that before, or I've never seen it in that way before. In doing so, you get a feeling that you're maybe helping people to open up their own perspective.
I get the feeling through your book that you're very pleased to be a part of the planet. You feel that you have a place that you fit in, as maybe all of us do.
I think that's quite true. It's very much the central theme of the book. And it's important to me to realize this and to be always aware of this because it puts mankind into perspective and how we relate with our environment. And my feeling is that we're part of the spectrum of life. A rainbow is representative of the spectrum of light, and man is just part of the spectrum of life found on this planet.
We move from the close-up of a photographer's underwater lands to our own close-up feature of one of the world's most popular dive destinations.
The Dutch Antilles and the underwater garden of Bonaire. We've chosen Bonaire as the featured destination for our premiere issue. Bonaire sits in the Dutch Antilles at the very southernmost tip of the Caribbean Sea, right off the coast of Venezuela.
This is a diver's dream of an island.
The dream begins on Bonaire the moment we plunge into the water. We open our eyes to a fairyland of coral heads and gorgonians. I've never seen coral formations so lush. The water is clear and warm, with visibility close to 100 feet, and no thermocline.
No problem with currents here, unlike the Sea of Cortez. So we can drift lazily through the coral and enjoy the view of this underwater garden paradise, terraced by the sea into gradual drop-offs.
Along the reef slope, we find a variety of sponges almost everywhere, some with over 40 individual tubes. Blue tube sponges like this one add to the striking color palette of Bonaire. The reefs here are like a painting, too pretty to be real, as if an artist has splashed the canvas with bright blues, yellows, oranges, greens, and purples. Bonaire is a boomerang-shaped island. The concave leeward side faces westward and wraps around Klein, which means little, Bonaire. The leeward side of Bonaire has ideal conditions for diving the year around, but dive operators seldom dive the windward side because of dangerous surf and currents. There are some 44 marked sites.
I see coral heads in Bonaire that have been heaped by time into fantasy formations that look like mushrooms, fairy castles, and all kinds of animals. One of the pleasures in diving here to me is a total sense of immersion into another world, the planet ocean at Bonaire.
Seems like every time we dive, we discover new names for these formations. Guess some are pretty weird. The walrus, Darth Vader, and the octopus, and the beautiful cathedral. Join us in a swim past some of our favorites.
Hello, Capitan. Hola.
Our Seafans crew is diving with Bruce Bowker's Caribbean. Bruce is one of the many experienced dive operators on Bonaire. He's been a dive guide on Bonaire for more than 13 years. Bruce has 2 very fast privateer boats that hold a maximum of 10 divers. That way, Bruce can give his guests personal attention while whisking them to any of the 44 dive sites on the island, some of which he discovered and named. Bruce's Caribbean makes diving very convenient with its own pier. Each of the rooms has a refrigerator so you can stow the local brew. Amstel is our favorite. And some of the rooms have kitchens and ocean views. There's even a freshwater swimming pool for instruction or lounging.
If you lose your mask or want a tasty t-shirt, the resort has a small retail shop and also a classroom facility where Nowie and Patty instructors will help you get certified or upgrade your skills.
Right next door to Bruce's Caribbean is the Flamingo Beach Hotel with Dive Bonaire.
The Flamingo Beach is built in a Spanish style. The 148 rooms surround courtyards, a pool, and walkways with landscaping that is lush, if only by Bonairean standards. There's not a lot of beaches on Bonaire, but the Flamingo's got one, and 2 restaurants overlooking the water.
On the grounds, there's also a boutique for those divers like myself who want to shop on the island, a barefoot casino, and an underwater photo center.
Dive Bonaire, located at the Flamingo, is the largest dive operation in the Caribbean, with 10 boats and 30 staff members. Each boat loads no more than 20 divers, with a dive master and a captain, and goes to a different prearranged site every day.
Just north of town is the Bonaire Beach Hotel and the Bonaire Scuba Center. If a beach is a necessity for you, the Bonaire Beach is spread over the largest on the island. The complex is being renovated, and its facilities include recreation for the entire family. It has a pool, 2 restaurants, a casino, tennis courts, sailboarding, and miniature golf.
Another surface interval activity available at the Bonaire Beach is a sunset cruise on the sailboat Lady Jima.
The hotel's dive shop, the Bonaire Scuba Center, has a complete dive and instruction facility with beach diving available right at Front Porch Reef just offshore. This site features a drop-off to 90 feet and an old wreck that is becoming a living reef. At the Bonaire Scuba Center, you can also get your film developed overnight, and it has a full line of rental equipment.
Just a little farther up the way past the Bonaire Beach is Captain Don Stewart's habitat. He likes to think of this place as a dive shop with rooms.
For years, I'd heard about Captain Don's reputation as an island character. An American expatriate, Captain Don has been on Bonaire for 24 years and shares his love of diving with the many repeat visitors he calls his friends. Captain Don, we've been touring your beautiful habitat here, and I'm just curious, what brought you to Bonaire?
Well, luckily, I stopped off one day in a boat to pick up a little water and just never left.
Did your boat stop too?
The boat's still here, yes. The keel's quite deep. I lost it here.
Where is
Old and tired. Well, she had been messed up with a hurricane a little bit, and she simply sank. She's down in front of the old Flamingo Beach Club right now.
Is that a dive site now, your boat?
Of course it is not.
No?
Well, who wants to resume the bones of your mother?
What do you think is the thing that keeps people coming back to the habitat year after year? I know you have a lot of repeat visitors. What's the unique thing about the habitat?
The time that I started here, which was 10 years ago, I'd already acquired quite so many thousands of people who I've dove with. And I received a lot of encouragement from them, too, to put a place together stemmed around the dive shop. When I say that, I mean we are a dive shop with rooms, with villas, with restaurants. By the way, we have a restaurant at 3 stars now. And shops, boat building yards, and all the things that require, plus nursery with all of our plants that we raise. We do everything ourselves.
What do you think is the one thing that you've done for diving on the island of Bonaire that you are the proudest of?
I think it made good sense to keep our hands off the tools of our trade, and that's what the reefs are. I found that I could make far more money, not only for myself, but for all those I had trained here, and a livelihood to be able to maintain a constant reef, a good condition reef that I can take tourists, for example. I used to take them up for $1 a trip and show them the reef. Tell them to please put your gun away, with the gun we don't need. And there was no laws those days, but people were getting smart. And I never had any particular difficulty convincing people. After I told them they would break their gun, probably break 2 of their arms, and confiscate all their gear if they wanted to continue to shoot. But people really seriously came around very quick to conservation.
Captain Don and the other dive operators on Bonaire joined forces with the Netherlands Antilles government to form the Bonaire Marine Park. The park includes all waters surrounding Bonaire from high tide mark down to a depth of 200 feet. This effort has protected the fragile reef environment so that it now teems with friendly, almost tame fish, like these tangs swimming through the Elkhorn coral. The Elkhorn zone is typically within a 3 to 13-foot depth off Bonaire. This Elkhorn is off Klein Bonaire, the uninhabited island less than a half a mile off the leeward side of Bonaire. Here, at a dive or snorkel site called the Knife, the Elkhorn is so dense it forms an intricate maze. It's a joy to swim through, and around every corner you find something new.
Yes, but Jimmy, we see something new around almost every corner in Bonaire.
I found these protected reefs a fine place to observe the relationship between the inhabitants. Many buddy pairs, such as this parrot and trumpetfish, are common in the shallow terrace zone. On Bonaire, this zone typically starts at about 10 to 30 feet and gently slopes down to around 60. This makes Bonaire a perfect spot for beginning divers, snorkelers, or those hardcore bottom timers. You know, the folks who want to make 3 or 4 dives every day and need good shallow sites for afternoon dives.
I am finding a week much too short to visit all of the 44 marked dive sites on Bonaire, but Bruce is taking us to a good sample in one of his privateers. He calls this boat his vet, and he treats it accordingly. Unlike many other popular dive islands, only one boat is allowed at each site on Bonaire. I like this because you'll never meet 40 other divers when you go down into the park here. Although I know that we never step into the same ocean twice, I like to ask an experienced dive guide like Bruce what we might expect on any dive.
What's the dive like at Carl's Hill?
It has a nice drop-off, and then there is a mound on the one corner, so it's a sheer wall that drops down to about 30 to 60 feet, which is one of the main features of the dive, along with the drop-off itself. A lot of nice coral formations, a lot of nice sponges at Carl's Hill, too.
I discover lush coral all the way down, starting with pillar coral at the top, leading to cavernous star coral and butterprint brain coral. The site is named for famed underwater photographer Carl Rossler, and the colors here are a photographer's delight. Carl's Hill is one of a handful of dives the local guides call walls in the drop-off zone that circles the island. Now, the difference between a wall and a drop-off may be merely semantics, but those of us who have explored the walls at Grand Cayman and Cozumel may find Bonaire's version rather tame. The deepest part of the wall is typical of the drop-off zone, with flattened or encrusting growth of coral and some flat sheet corals. There's more to see on Carl's Hill than you can absorb in one dive. After a deep dive like Carl's Hill, Bruce recommends a showy shallow dive, 1,000 steps.
Very nice shallow dive. The drop-off is like the other drops off of Bonaire, but the main feature of 1,000 steps is the shallow water being perhaps 30 feet or less. Very, very nice coral formations in the shallows. It's actually a nice afternoon dive, but I want to go up there in the morning because we'll have better lighting. It's a good afternoon dive, I mean, because of the depth. A lot of very friendly fish, a lot of fish that we won't see in other areas. Black durgeons, and there's just a lot of friendly fish up there. They're fed so often by the divers that they come around. Matter of fact, the yellowtails get so friendly that they get in the way, and you have to shoo them away like flies.
Even though it's warm here and the fish are friendly, we're wearing skin suits or wetsuits because sometimes there are burning do-not-touch-me sponges, fire coral, and a type of almost invisible stinging jellyfish that the locals call pica-pica.
Jimmy catches a hawksbill turtle. He's too excited to be afraid of being bitten by this friendly reef inhabitant, but the little guy looks like he needs air badly, so Jimmy quickly releases him for a swim up to the surface for a breath. Bruce tells us that hawksbills are not common around Bonaire. Another one of Bruce's favorite dives is called sponges.
I try to make friends with this barracuda, another fish that we find frequently in Bonaire. You know, I never quite understand their fierce reputation. Just like this one, they usually seem totally disinterested in divers. We end a full day of diving by trying our luck at the Flamingo Beach Casino.
But my luck is terrible. As usual, Jimmy wins.
That might be because it's so relaxed here. This is certainly not Las Vegas. There are people walking around here in their bare feet.
One day we decide to take a break from the underwater pleasures of Bonaire to tour the island. We drive to the hills in the northwest part of Bonaire, which is a national park.
The lookout point over Gadomir, the salty lake on this side of the island, makes a good place for a break. The rocks and hills remind me of Arizona, but the lake provides an oasis.
One of the wonderful mysteries of this island is the flamingos. The locals tell us that at least 50 of these birds leave the island at sunset every day. Where do they go? Not even the Audubon Society has been able to figure it out. The likeliest guess is Venezuela. We watch them leave without finding an answer, but we are assured that they come back every morning at sunrise to add a splash of pink to the stark landscape.
Yeah, Lynn, but what about the goats? No one seems to know how they survive, how they seem to find wells and wet caves to drink out of, but they've thrived on Bonaire since their introduction in the 1800s.
Now wild, they were originally raised for salted meat. Historically, the goats have actually outnumbered the people on Bonaire. Today, they casually stroll the streets of Rincon, the village on the eastern side of the island. I am fascinated with these cactus fences. The farmers had to build them to keep the goats out. They take 3 or 4 foot pieces, chop them off, and wire them together. But somehow they're still alive, even though they aren't planted.
The White Mountains are actually tons of freshly dried sea salt. I was surprised to find out that salt production is second only to tourism as Bonaire's biggest industry.
The raw power of thousands of miles of open ocean bashes the eastern side of the island. It's rare that the seas are calm enough to dive here. The waves have claimed many wrecks on this side of the island.
Even the lighthouse hasn't saved some boats from crashing on the reef here. But the island's most famous wreck, the Hilma Hooker, sank on the calm side of the island.
Steve Cox, a diver from Albuquerque, New Mexico, grabbed his home video camera to capture the Hilma Hooker's last moments of float.
We played detective to try to find out the real story behind her sinking. So Cayman's got its wall, and Kona's got its whales, and Bonaire's got the Hilma Hooker, right? I heard more stories on the little airplane coming over from Curacao about this thing. What actually happened to it?
The wreck itself, or the ship before it sank, was a drug boat, so it was confiscated by the Netherlands Antilles government. It was left in town for about 2 months on the pier waiting for the owner to show up. But obviously the owner's not going to show up, because if he did, he'd get thrown in jail. So the government was worried about the boat actually sinking at the pier. It was really in bad shape. The government had to pay for everything, the pumping and all that, to keep it afloat. So it was decided that during the stormy season, which is starting now in September, October, November, they'd tow it down to this dive site right out here, or this site right here. And if it did sink, it would become a dive site. And everybody knew it was going to sink, but no one would actually physically sink it, because if they did, then the owner of the ship could claim it was sunk on purpose. And indeed, it was not sunk on purpose. It sank on its own. It was just so full of holes it went down.
Of course, you get different accounts of the sinking, depending on who you ask.
Were you here when the Hilma Hooker sank?
Of course, I was a help sinker. While they were cutting these secret panels open, the welders were careless, and they'd lay the torch down on the bottom of the boat, and they'd burn a little hole in the bottom of the boat, and the water would start coming, put the torch out, and they'd wipe it off a little bit and fire it up again. It was getting lower and lower, and the harbor master said, "Please get it away from the dock." Somebody didn't get the portholes closed. So as he listed down all those low portholes, they started putting in streams of water 21 inches in diameter. That was a lot of water going in there. It was really a pity.
You've seen the last of the Hilma Hooker.
The wreck seems even deeper than its actual 80 to 90 feet because the visibility is poor today. From this side, the ship looms, a gloomy and eerie thing in the water. The water feels even colder here, but when we ask Bruce why, he just says that the cold water sometimes comes up from the deep ocean unexpectedly. It's a reminder to us that the ocean floor drops abruptly to 200 feet beyond the reef, and even deeper ocean lies just beyond.
Standing here behind the wheel of the Hilma Hooker, I get my last chance to look out at this Bonarian paradise. And I'm reminded that on the surface, it's kind of like the craters of the moon, not much to look at. But down here, it's a diver's dream.
Another regular CFANS feature will be the review and testing of new dive equipment.
Our reviewer will be our producer, John Evans, an open water scuba instructor and a certified equipment specialist.
This is a piece of equipment that I've had the opportunity to use on almost a daily basis over the past couple of weeks in our location shooting. It's the new Dacor HTS, that stands for High-Tech Stabilizing Sea-Chute Buoyancy Compensator. Dacor's newest modern open shoulder design creates more freedom of movement in the water and less drag when you're moving through the water. It's got a number of features that I like. One is the easy opening, easily adjustable cummerbund waistband, secured into the BC with 6 nylon straps across the back. 2 of them have D-rings. This cummerbund helps support the weight of the tank when you're out of the water on your hips rather than on your shoulders. Also, it's got a solid plastic back plate, but there's a foam pad on the inside of that back plate. It's also removable. That padding keeps the back plate in the tank from banging up against your spine. BC itself is, the shell is Cordura nylon. Seems pretty tough and durable. Inside is the polyurethane bladder. It's removable, replaceable, accessed by a zipper. Tank has adjustable shoulder straps and quick release buckles for those straps. Snap in or out of place on the surface or in the water. Pull a D-ring to tighten them, lift up on the buckle to release them. One thing I really like about this BC is the large slant pockets. This one on the left-hand side has a zipper closure that I can find real easily when I'm working in the water because of this large ring, and open and close get into easily, even with gloves on. BC secures to a tank with a nylon strap. This one's already adjusted for an aluminum 80, so it goes on there relatively easily. This buckle's not really any more easily adjustable than a lot of the others I've encountered, and none of them seem to really work that well for quick, fast adjustment to fit the differing tank sizes that one might encounter. But this snaps into place on a cam, then the tab is held down with Velcro so it doesn't get snagged and accidentally open. Snap-on low-pressure inflator mechanism has a feature that allows you to control the amount of air being added to the BC by the pressure that you're applying with your thumb. We at CFANS have found that to be a really useful feature when you're engaged in underwater photography or any other kind of activity where you need to fine-tune your buoyancy and achieve maximum stability in the water. The adjustable quick-release shoulder straps make it easy to get in and out of the BC. Just sit down with it, snap in one side, then snap in the other. Snug up the Velcro waistband. Then there's a chest snap lock. Hold it snugly across your chest. At that point you can pull down or pull up on the adjustment mechanism. Get it comfortable and you're ready to get in the water. In addition to the normal deflation mechanism on the BC, you can simply yank down on the inflator hose to vent air out. Either way allows for easy, controlled descents. There's also an emergency dump valve on the right-hand shoulder. Once you're at a particular depth, the deflated BC is pretty easily adjusted, tightened around the abdomen simply by repositioning the cummerbund waistband. Then your buoyancy can be fine-tuned with the inflator mechanism. The right-hand pocket has an orange tab on the outside. It makes it easy for your buddy to tell that that's where you're keeping your octopus. And the Velcro securing the pocket makes access to the octopus very easy. On the left-hand pocket, the ring on the zipper makes the zipper easy to locate and to open. And the pocket itself provides ample room for treats for our friends in the water, a slate that you can hook onto the inside clip, even a pair of gloves in there. The simple cummerbund and chest strap, along with the quick-release shoulder straps, make it very uncomplicated to either remove or replace the BC in the water. The BC floats me comfortably at the surface. Fits snugly, but I don't feel bound in or tight. The open shoulders got plenty of room for movement up front. Also, with most of its buoyancy underneath, my arms floats me vertically in the water, leaves me in a safe and comfortable position for as long as I want to be here. All in all, it's a real desirable product that I plan to continue using. One of the nice things about doing these equipment reviews is that you get the chance to bump into things that you don't necessarily expect in the water. For instance, doing the Dacor BC review, we ran into a green moray eel that the dive masters called George. We decided to go back down on the next dive to see if we could get to know George a little bit better. This fellow seemed very friendly and ready to relate to us. Seemed eager to take a look, and even got to the point where he was ready to come out and play. From the gash on this guy's side, it looked as though he might have encountered a hook or some other unfriendly item underwater, but he still seemed very willing to be with us, didn't seem threatened by our presence whatsoever. Swimming freely in the water, the eel has to be one of the most graceful animals I've ever encountered. And it's the thrill of a lifetime to be able to have one circling around you and see its grace and its streamlinedness in the water. A new piece of equipment that we've had the opportunity to test over the past couple of weeks is the ScubaPro G250 balanced adjustable second stage. It's ScubaPro's updated, refined version of its longtime popular balanced adjustable second stage. ScubaPro mates this new second stage in a combination package with the Mark X first stage, also a new design. Mark X has 4 low-pressure ports for attachment of a variety of low-pressure devices, second stages, inflator hoses, etc. There are also 2 high-pressure ports on either side of the swivel yoke for flexibility, convenience in mounting your high-pressure gauge console in whatever configuration you like. One feature of the new second stage is an increased internal diameter hose between the first and second stage allows for greater unrestricted airflow between the two. The second stage itself retains the adjustment screw that was found on the original Scuba Pro balanced adjustable second stage. You can adjust the screw all the way out for minimal resistance, easy breathing at depth or working hard under the water, or adjust it all the way in for things like surf entries or other shallow areas where you don't want accidental free flow. The second stage itself is made of fiberglass reinforced polyester, a high impact plastic that's more corrosion resistant than the old metal cases would be. It's also less expensive to produce and therefore less expensive to replace in the event that the housing is damaged in the course of use. The case itself opens easily from the front for access to the silicone diaphragm for cleaning or replacement, and for your Scuba Pro technician to be able to access the valve mechanism itself. The interior design of the housing, rounded corners, minimizes the number of things to interfere with, restrict airflow. The truly unique feature of the G250 is what Scuba Pro refers to as the Venturi-initiated vacuum assist. What that means is that the regulator is designed so that when you begin breathing, the regulator itself and the flow of air through the regulator is able to sustain the flow of air. You don't have to continue an effort to get a full breath of air out of the regulator. What controls this Venturi effect in the regulator is a small vane in the mouthpiece itself. It too can be adjusted from the outside, again either at the surface or in the water. When it's adjusted for maximum assist, the vane directs the air directly into the mouthpiece, creates that vacuum, and sustains breathing. When it's adjusted for minimum assist, the vane deflects the air and that vacuum effect is minimized. The effect of that is dramatic. Right here on the surface, with the adjustment valve for resistance set all the way out and the Venturi assist set at maximum boost, any any initiation of airflow is sustained by the vacuum. That airflow is eliminated by turning the Venturi lever down to minimum boost. And in that minimum boost position, you don't get that sustained airflow. The effect of this is really noticeable in the water, and the advantage to being able to make this adjustment either at the surface or in the water is that you can tailor the tuning of your regulator to the type of diving that you plan for any particular dive, or for changes in the type of diving you're doing during the course of a dive. If you find yourself working harder, swimming against a current, something like that during part of a dive, you can reduce the cracking effort and maximize the Venturi vacuum assist to reduce your own effort required to breathe comfortably. I think the thing to do is to take a look at how these units perform in the water. In the water, the G250 performs very well. With the Viva Assist, I'm able to virtually sip air with the regulator almost breathing itself. There's a marked difference in breathing ease with the G250 over Scuba Pro's earlier balanced adjustable, which is a very well-performing regulator on its own. The adjustment for cracking effort is easily accessible in the water, as is the Viva adjustment lever. And when they're properly adjusted, the G250 breathes perfectly with no free flow. I tried the G250 at a variety of depths, also in a variety of positions. It performed very well in all of them with no free flow, and even only a little misting when I was using it upside down. All in all, I'd call it a really neat product, state-of-the-art piece of dive equipment.
Thanks, John. And now, Lynn, something I'm very interested in. I'm sorry I didn't get to do this with you. 24 hours in a scuba habitat. Why don't you tell us a little bit about it?
I'm sorry you didn't get to either, Jimmy. We went to Key Largo, Florida, to the Marine Resources Foundation for an Aquanaut certification.
The foundation is in the mangrove swamps of the Florida Keys. These warm and protected lagoons teem with life, but the environment nurtures the reefs that most sport divers are used to exploring. The habitat here offers a unique diving experience with no worries about running out of air, bottom time, or troublesome decompression schedules. Ever since I read Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, I've harbored a secret fantasy about living in the ocean. So I jumped at the chance to stay at the habitat run by the Marine Resources Development Foundation. The foundation's president is Jan Koblik. He's one of the pioneers of living and working in the sea. He's been called the Jacques Cousteau of America. Jan gives me a tour of the foundation, and we discuss how he's been trying to involve the public in undersea research. Jan, what do you see as your vision for the Marine Resources Development Foundation?
Well, we've been working on that vision for about 15 years now. I guess we're getting close to the point where I'm going to feel pretty comfortable about it. We're opening it up to the public. We're getting more people involved in the ocean. We've doubled the number of aquanauts in the last 24 months, 2 years. It took 20 years to get 500 aquanauts, and now there are 1,000. We're getting more people involved. With Jules Habitat coming, there'll be even more exposure to the ocean. Our aquaculture projects are beginning to take hold and get the kind of interest from the private sector that they need to, and I'm feeling pretty good about all these years of things going very slowly at a turtle's pace.
Jan's own experiments with sea sprouts in Key Largo may help solve the problem of food production, especially in developing countries. The sprouts are high in protein and vitamins and taste like salty alfalfa sprouts. Jan has created the only program in the world for certification of sport diving aquanauts. The degree is awarded to those who spend at least 24 hours living and working underwater at the habitat.
Our underwater education habitat program is open to sports divers, and there is now a PADI and a NAUI specialty course that they can take, and they come out as a PADI or NAUI certified either underwater habitat diver or aquanaut, depending upon which organization you certify under.
I've decided that an aquanaut certification would look great hanging on my office wall next to my law degree. So I embark on the program along with Lou and Sue, two CFANS crew members who are also excited about the prospect of unlimited diving for 24 hours.
Should be great. Fun experience.
Well, it's not 20,000 leagues under the sea, but a couple will do.
Chris Olstead, the ground support technician for the habitat, provides a really thorough orientation for potential aquanauts. He gives us a history of other habitats around the world, a description of the underwater and ground support systems for the habitat, and most important, an explanation of how to use the hookah hoses.
It's then tied off with a piece of line, which now should be tied off to one of these posts. Make sure you leave enough slack in your hose so you can not only get your regulator into the hatchway, but up to the surface without untying it. So what you end up with is you got your figure 8 pattern here, and a loop that extends about 3/4 of the way to the surface because your hoses float. It comes back down inside the hatch. Let's go into the support van. I'll go through some of the systems we have in there before we get all suited up. This is where I'll be logging your dives. We have first aid oxygen, standby scuba. We have a first aid kit underneath the bunk. and this is where I'll be sleeping tonight. Okay, these other lines we have here, we have a 12-volt DC cable for outside habitat lighting, 110-volt AC cable for inside habitat power, microwave, refrigerator, and lighting, hot water hose, cold water hose, and 2 communications cables. One's for the sound-powered telephone and the intercom, the other one's for the other one's a spare.
The habitat sits in a sort of residential lagoon in 26 feet of water. It's shaped like a space capsule on stilts. Aliens have landed in Planet Ocean. I worry that my claustrophobia will erupt in the small chamber. It's the first time any of us have used the hookah hoses. We need some practice to learn how to use and stow them. Now the breathing is easy, but so's the tangling. One of the delights about the habitat experience is popping in and out of the hatch. It reminds me of the fun of climbing into a treehouse when we were kids. Inside, we're all very relieved and excited to find out that the habitat's surprisingly roomy. The capsule is about the size of a small camper trailer with comfortable bunks, radio communication to the land base, a tape player, a microwave, refrigerator, toilet, and shower, all the comforts of home. Fresh water and air are continually supplied and monitored by Chris through the hoses to the base. And the hatch is like having a swimming pool on the floor. We can jump in whenever we like, Chris tells us, as long as we radio the base that we're going for a swim and check our auxiliary air supply. A marine biology tour of the mangrove environment is the first expedition out of the habitat. Art Mitchell, one of the Foundation's biologists, leads us on a dive and points out the algae, mangrove roots, and crustaceans that thrive in this protected environment. After the dive, Art and I relax in the observation bubble that hangs underneath the habitat. Art tells me about his goal of educating the sport diver about how the coral reefs we all love to dive on are dependent on the intricate food chain that begins in these soupy waters. This delicate food chain builds from the mangrove roots and tendrils, 4 different kinds of algae, tunicates, to the fish and other life we're used to seeing on the reef. By early evening, we're ready for dinner. Fixing it is easy in the habitat. We share our meal with fish who seem to converge on the large porthole, checking out their new neighbors. I discover new surprises on a night dive in the lagoon. The colorful growth on the pilings erupts at night. We put our afternoon marine biology lesson to immediate use. After what seems like a long but uneventful night, I'm ready for a morning dip. As I swim back to the base, I pass one of the lagoon's curiosities. No, this isn't a diver who stayed too long in the habitat. It's an underwater sculpture being formed by electrical current. Now the current runs through wire mesh and extracts minerals from the water. Just one more part of what makes the habitat a unique and novel experience. I would recommend the Aquanaut certification for the diver who thinks he or she has done everything, or for the biology aficionado who wants a chance to experience more of planet ocean on a macro level. The lure of unlimited diving with no decompression was one of the things that drew us to the habitat. Yet the lagoon doesn't take long to explore if your only interest is the landscape. We emerged happy to be aquanauts and glad to have had the experience. Today, the problems of surface support, safety, and decompression make it virtually impossible to put a habitat for sport divers on an open coral reef. I'm sure that someday, dedicated aquanauts like Jan Koblik will create a habitat experience for us beyond the mangrove lagoon.
And now, if you don't want to spend all your time underwater, we have an absolutely great alternative.
That's right, Jimmy. The Garden Island of Kauai, where you can have good diving and spectacular scenery.
On Kauai, we share with you diving in the kingdom that Pele built. The Garden Island is the home of Pele, the Hawaiian goddess of fire, who rules the volcano and who's left her sign above and below the surface of the water of the island.
Kauai was the first discovered of the Hawaiian Islands, both by the Polynesians and, in fact, much later by Captain Cook. It was also the first formed by volcanoes millions of years ago.
Since her birth, Kauai has had eons to mellow and flower. Waialeale, the volcano that was Pele's home, is now known as the wettest place on Earth, with 450 inches of rainfall a year. The rain and volcanic soil combine to sprout lush vegetation, carpeting the hills and valleys. The evolution of the island has created both pluses and minuses for the diver. The biggest plus is that Kauai is that tropical paradise we all look for in islands but rarely find. This island wraps itself around your senses with sights and smells and sounds, both primordial and romantic.
This trip, we are staying and diving on the north shore of the island. The coastline is rugged and secluded here, but you generally can't dive here because the northeastern winds are too strong. But now in the summer months and into September, it's all calmer water and really dramatic scenery.
We're diving with Canon Linda Bale, whose 26-foot Radon, Bubbles Below, is the only dive boat licensed to operate on the North Shore. It's chartered through Sea Sage Diving Center, a full-service diving facility in Kapa'a.
Their two-tank morning or afternoon trips at the North Shore generally include both a deep and a shallow dive. On the deep 80 to 100-foot dives along the outer shelf, we find dramatic lava rock seascapes and interesting reef inhabitants. At a site called Truck Stop, there's a giant archway, so big you could drive a truck through it. Another site called Oceanarium offers canyons and walls and a variety of marine life. On one dive there, we find a white-tip reef shark lounging under one of the overhangs. Closer to shore and accessible as either boat dives or beach dives are shallower 30 to 50-foot dive sites like tunnels or lighthouse. Here, the lava flow has created an intricate maze of tunnels and caves that cry out for exploration. But underwater, we find some minuses created by the island's history. Runoff from years of rainfall on volcanic soil has covered some of the reefs with silt. A recent hurricane battered some of the best dive sites. Both current and silt create low visibility.
Even with these limitations, Kauai offers good diving. Exploring the lava formations, I can imagine Pele at work. In 1971, Lee Tepley didn't have to imagine. Kilauea on the island of Hawaii erupted, and Lee rushed to the site to become the first diver to capture the action on film.
All of a sudden, there it was exploding and popping underwater, and red fire was coming out of the rocks. It was kind of a wild experience. The lava flowed in from the land, and it would harden up as soon as it hit the water, form a black, harden up and cool down, form a black crust, and it would be hot underneath the crust. And then it would break through the crust and then float for a few seconds and form another hard crust. That's the way it moved down, by a series of kind of like a little bit like toothpaste coming out of a tube and then hardening and then something else coming out a little further down. And that's how it would go down into the water. We'd gotten into very, very shallow water, like about 10 feet or so, and we were filming stuff that was just flowing in from the shore, and it was kind of surgy. And I had the feeling that a big wave came along and sort of knocked me off my feet, and I felt I was being carried right into this hot stuff as it came in, and there was nothing I could do about it. I was expecting to, feel something burning at any time, and all of a sudden I find myself down at 90 feet of water, and I don't know how I got there, and it turned out that I wasn't really being carried in at all. I'd gotten into a landslide, but it was just really, really uncomfortably hot.
Lee Tepley's encounter with these underwater fireworks is just one of many adventures he's had in over 20 years as an underwater cinematographer. Another is his up-close and personal meeting with some regular winter visitors in Hawaiian waters.
I got hit by a mother humpback whale once about 4 years ago, and that was particularly exciting. I've done a lot of filming of humpbacks, and other people have too, but as far as I know, I'm still the only guy that was ever actually hit by a humpback underwater. And it was the mother and a baby, and the baby came right at me out of curiosity, and the mother seemed to be just staying close to baby. And she was kind of turning, and I was swimming backwards, filming at the same time I was swimming backwards. But she did hit me pretty hard, and it was kind of a surprise. It was pretty exciting, getting hit by a whale.
And for you divers who don't want to spend all your time underwater, or if you're traveling with families or friends who don't dive, there are countless activities ashore.
The Napali coast and the mountains behind it contain valleys where the first Hawaiians lived, and the legendary Minahunis, or the Little People. The coast can be viewed by helicopter or by fast zodiacs that explore its cliffs and caves. And while the Napali region is not very accessible by foot, close to Hanalei, a short walk down a jungle path leads to the sheer joy of beaches perfect for sunning and swimming. The golf course at Princeville Resort is the only one in Hawaii rated among the top 100 courses in America. A championship course with a world-class view. Go, baby! Now that's in a drink. Flowing and cooling lava has formed another dramatic phenomenon along Kauai's North Shore. huge caves that have filled with fresh water make for a refreshing snorkel diversion.
Jimmy, I really feel like this week on Kauai has just gone like that. We haven't even had a taste of what this island has to offer.
And we never dove on the Poipu side, down on the south or the east coast of this wonderful island.
We've met some really great guys who do dive operations along those coasts down there, and I think it'd be fun to come back and dive with them.
It wouldn't take much of a nudge to get me back to Kauai. I really love this island.
We think you'd enjoy it too, so let's come back sometime.
Hi, this is John Evans for the entire Seafans crew, with a special thanks to you for being with us for the premiere issue. I invite you to send me any comments or suggestions you have about this show, or about what you'd like to see covered in future issues. Since we're not sponsored or subsidized by any manufacturers or resorts, we're free to report on whatever you, our viewers, want to see. In the coming year, we're planning on taking you to Micronesia, the Cayman Islands, Fiji, the Bahamas, and more of Planet Ocean's best diving. We'll also be bringing you more from the world's best underwater photographers and cinematographers. We look forward to your joining us for the next issue of Seafans. Till then, safe diving.